I want you to just close your eyes for a second and try to put yourself in a highly specific, truly terrifying place.
Oh, this is a rough one.
It really is. So it's the dead of night, summer of 1973, and you are deep in the mountains of Montana at Headwaters State Park.
Right.
Imagine you are 12-year-old Heidi Yeager. You're asleep in this heavy canvas tent with your siblings,
Hey,
and suddenly you just wake up.
just out of nowhere.
Exactly. And there was this cold breeze hitting the back of your neck, which is weird because you're inside a zipped-up tent. I mean, there absolutely shouldn't be a breeze.
Oh, not at all.
So you reach out your hand in the pitch black, just kind of feeling around, and your fingers brush against wet, dewy grass.
Oh, man.
And as your eyes slowly adjust to the dark, you realize you're looking at this gaping hole, sliced surgically right through the heavy canvas. And your 7-year-old sister, Susie, who's, sleeping inches away from you, is completely gone.
It is the ultimate nightmare. I mean, it's a scenario completely stripped of any logic, any warning. There's no rational explanation for a kid waking up to that. The psychological terror of that moment is just absolute.
It really is. And today we are opening up a massive stack of case files, original police transcripts, and this harrowing memoir written by Susie's mother, Marietta. It's called The Lost Child.
Yeah, that book it's incredibly tough to read, but so important.
Right, because our mission in this deep dive is to unravel a story that didn't just shatter a family, but it actually forced law enforcement into, completely uncharted territory.
Totally.
This is the case that birthed modern FBI criminal profiling.
Yeah.
And they did it out of sheer desperate necessity.
Yeah, and we really need to set the stage for what investigators were up against here. This isn't just a story about a tragic kidnapping. This is a terrifying psychological cat and mouse game.
Right.
It's between a grieving mother and a highly intelligent, calculating psychopath. And you have to remember the era we're talking about. This is playing out in the early 1970s.
Which means, no tech.
Exactly. There is no DNA testing. There are no cell phone there are no security cameras capturing license plates on the highway. The investigators are essentially operating completely in the dark, armed with tools that were just, woefully inadequate for the mind they were hunting.
So true. So the timeline starts at about 5 a.m. Heidi runs to her parents' camper.
Mm-hmm.
Bill and Marietta Yeager rush out with flashlights, frantically sweeping the beams across the campsite, just calling into the trees. And what they find just drops your stomach. Susie's stuffed animals, the ones she had been literally clutching when she fell asleep, are lying abandoned in the wet grass just outside that sliced hole in the tent.
Marietta later described looking up at the pitch-black sky and just begging the sun to rise. She said the darkness itself felt like a physical weight on her. But when the sun finally does come up, the reality of the situation somehow gets even darker.
Right, because a massive volunteer search party forms. And as they are combing the woods, the Yeagers overhear this volunteer mention a chilling historical detail to another searcher.
This part always gets me.
It's awful.
Yeah.
They hear that 5 years earlier, in May of 1968, a 12-year-old Boy Scout named Michael Rainey was fatally stabbed inside his tent.
Yeah.
At this exact same state park.
Which, that completely shifts the paradigm for the police. This instantly elevates the situation from a standard missing persons case to a potential serial predator scenario.
Right, they're dealing with a monster.
Exactly. But the agonizing part for the early investigators is the absolute vacuum of physical evidence. When daylight fully breaks, they basically find a faint footprint path in the morning dew leading toward the parking lot, and they find a rock near the tent with reddish-brown stains on it.
And back in 1973, they test that rock, they confirm it's human blood, but that is literally the end of the road scientifically. It's untestable beyond that.
Yeah, they couldn't do anything else with it.
It's a dead end. So the days tick by. The physical search turns up nothing. And that is when the psychological torture begins. 5 days after the abduction, the FBI field office in Denver gets a call demanding $25,000. But the caller hangs up before giving any instructions.
Classic control tactic.
Right. And then 2 days after that, a call goes to the home of a local Montana deputy who's actually out in the woods searching for Susie at that very moment.
Wow.
His wife answers, and the caller demands $50,000, telling her to put it in a dummy suitcase at a Denver bus depot.
Now, in kidnapping cases, the authorities always demand proof of life, right? Or at least proof that the caller actually has the victim and isn't just some opportunistic crank making things up.
Exactly, some weirdo reading the paper.
Right. So the caller volunteers a piece of evidence. He tells the deputy's wife to look at the index fingernails on Susie's hands. He says they are humped, like they have this slight, very specific deformity.
But wait, this is the detail that completely threw me when reading the files. The parents hadn't released that information to the press.
No, they hadn't.
In fact, they had actually forgotten to tell the police about it entirely. It was something Susie was born with, a quirk they barely noticed anymore. I mean, there was absolutely no way a random stranger could have guessed that.
Exactly, and we have to look at what that tells us about the offender's pathology right out of the gate. Because he isn't just looking for a ransom payout here.
No.
He is inserting himself directly into the family's trauma. He wants the parents to know, with this terrifying intimacy, that he's looking right at their little girl's hands. He is demonstrating total omnipotent control over the situation. It's a massive power trip.
And he flexes that power by never even showing up. The FBI sets up the dummy drop at the Denver bus depot. Agents are swarming the place undercover, and the guy just ghosts them.
Just leaves them hanging.
Yep. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. 10 days after Susie vanishes, a 20-year-old nurse named Donna Lemon goes missing nearby. 4 days later, she's found dead in a river in Idaho.
Which you'd think would be a massive red flag.
You would think. But local police totally dismiss any connection to Susie. They claim a 20-year-old woman and a 7-year-old girl are completely different victimologies.
Which, I mean, is such a rigid way of looking at it.
Right, so the investigation basically hits a wall. The summer ends. The Jaegers have to pack up their camper and make the agonizing drive back to Michigan without their daughter.
The silence that must have filled that vehicle is just unimaginable, and that silence stretches on for months. The local authorities are paralyzed by the lack of physical evidence until we get to the harsh Montana winter of February 1974.
Right, so transport yourself now to Manhattan, Montana. It's this tiny, quiet town just about 10 minutes away from that state park. A 19-year-old waitress named Sandy Dykman suddenly vanishes.
Okay.
Her dad reports her missing, and deputies start scouring the rural county. About a week later, they find themselves at this abandoned ranch, surrounded by desolate, snow-dusted sagebrush. They spot something white caught in the brush.
Yeah.
It's a pair of worn women's underwear.
It's a deliberate breadcrumb. He wanted them to find it.
And it leads them straight to a barn on the property. They force these heavy doors open, and inside, hidden under hay and a heavy tarp, is Sandy's little white Ford Cortina.
Whoa.
But it's the outbuildings that are pure nightmare fuel. Picture the investigators walking into these freezing, abandoned sheds. They find a bloody whip.
Oh, gosh.
They find melted candle wax pooled in these bizarre, ritualistic places. And inside the abandoned main house, they find a closet that someone had literally nailed shut from the outside.
You have to think about what the physical environment of a crime scene tells you about the offender's mind here. What investigators are walking into isn't just a murder scene. The nailed-shut closet, the wax, the whip, this is a meticulously constructed environment for prolonged psychological and physical torment.
Right?
It requires time, it requires privacy, and intense premeditation. This isn't a crime of passion.
No, not at all. And the climax of that horror comes on February 19th. Outside in the freezing cold, they find a burn pile. When they sift through the ash, they recover over 1,000 bone fragments, including teeth.
And this is where forensic anthropology, I mean, even in its early stages back then, completely flips the script.
Yeah.
Because using dental records, they quickly confirm that Sandy Dykman's remains are in that burn pile. But as they analyze the fragments, the anthropologists make this sickening discovery.
It's so awful.
There aren't just one set of remains in those ashes. There are two distinct biological profiles. And the second set of bones belongs to a child, specifically a little girl between the ages of 5 and 8.
It had to be Susie.
The realization just hits them like a freight train. Suddenly, these aren't isolated tragedies anymore. They are dealing with a highly organized serial predator operating right in their backyard.
Which means they aren't looking for a disorganized drifter anymore. They are looking for someone who feels entirely comfortable in this specific rural terrain.
Exactly.
And that geographic profile points them squarely at one local guy, David Meyerhofer.
Yep.
He's in his 20s. He's a local carpenter, a former Marine, and a Vietnam veteran. He actually grew up right there in Manhattan, Montana. And his name just happens to be sitting in both case files.
What a coincidence, right?
Right. With Sandy, he had recently asked her out on a date, and she turned him down. With Susie, he was one of the local oddballs who hung around the search parties, asking the cops highly specific questions. Plus, he just so happened to, quote-unquote, Find a woman's red blouse near the abandoned ranch and helpfully hand it over to the police.
Which is a classic tactic for an arrogant psychopath. It's called insertion.
Insertions.
Yeah. By finding evidence, he gets to monitor the police's progress, talk to the detectives directly, and basically toy with them right to their faces. But when investigators finally sit David down in an interrogation room, he is calm, he is polite, and he readily agrees to take a polygraph test.
And he passes it easily. Hold on, we really need to stop here, because this is where the entire history of criminal investigation fractures. I mean, how do you solve a case when the accepted science of the day says your prime suspect is innocent?
It's a massive roadblock.
The local authorities are stumped. They completely trust the polygraph. But this desperate FBI agent named Pete Dunbar refuses to let it go. He decides to travel to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and present this bizarre case to a few rogue agents who are experimenting with a brand new concept.
Yeah.
Something called psychological profiling.
This was truly revolutionary. Remember, law enforcement at this time relied entirely on tangible evidence, blood, fingerprints, eyewitnesses. What these early profilers were attempting to do was read the behavioral residue left at the crime scenes to construct a psychological portrait of the unknown subject.
But how do they actually do that? Because the files say they deduced the killer was white, in his 20s, modestly intelligent but a loner, with military experience who kept souvenirs. How do you pull all of that from a sliced tent in a burn pile?
Well, it's all about reverse engineering the behavior. Take the military experience, for instance.
Okay.
To walk into a pitch-black tent containing multiple sleeping people, silently slice the canvas, extract a child, and vanish without waking anyone. That requires immense tactical discipline, stealth, and nerve.
Wow, yeah.
That points far away from a disorganized amateur and strongly toward military training. They assumed his age and race based on the demographics of who could move through that specific rural Montana community without drawing suspicion.
That makes sense.
Right. And the souvenirs, well, an organized killer who builds a literal torture room at an abandoned ranch is obsessed with the fantasy. Souvenirs allow him to relive that fantasy long after the crime is actually over.
Oh, man. So it's like a medical diagnosis in the dark ages. Like the local cops have this machine, the polygraph, with its neat little squiggly lines telling them David Meyerhofer is scientifically innocent. And these guys in a basement at Quantico are using untested behavioral theory to say, no, the machine is being manipulated by a monster. That must have caused massive friction.
The friction between the departments was huge. But you have to understand why the polygraph failed in the first place. A polygraph does not detect lies.
Right.
It detects physiological stress. Your heart rate spiking, your palms sweating, your respiration changing.
So relying on a polygraph to catch a psychopath is basically like using a metal detector to find plastic. The machine isn't broken, it's just completely blind to the material it's scanning.
That is the perfect analogy, yes. A true psychopath's resting heart rate doesn't jump when they lie about a murder because the murder didn't cause them distress or guilt, it gave them pleasure.
It's chilling.
It is. But Agent Dunbar actually listens to Quantico. He convinces the local authorities to set a behavioral trap. They allow the press to run massive anniversary stories about Susie, knowing it will stroke the killer's ego and prompt him to act.
And it works flawlessly.
Yeah.
It is June 25, 1974. Exactly 1 year to the minute after Susie was taken from that tent. Put yourself in Marietta Yeager's shoes for a second.
You can't even imagine.
You are sitting by the phone in your kitchen in Michigan. It rings. You pick up the plastic receiver, and a voice on the other end says, I'm the guy who took her from you exactly a year ago to the minute.
What follows is one of the most agonizing psychological duels in criminal history. Marietta's fortitude here just defies belief. She knows that if she hangs up, or if she just screams at him and he hangs up, she loses her only link to her daughter.
Right.
She has to keep him talking. So she engages him for a full hour. She negotiates. She pleads. She actually leverages his own arrogance against him.
Yeah, she actually challenges him. When he claims he wiped Susie's memory using, like, psychotherapy so she wouldn't remember her parents, Marietta calls his bluff.
She does.
She demands to know his qualifications. She openly questions his intelligence.
Which is brilliant because a psychopath's biggest vulnerability is narcissistic injury. He couldn't stand being doubted by this mother. To prove how smart he was, he felt he had to provide details.
Wow.
Under that pressure, he slips. He admits to her how he took Susie. He tells this grieving mother that he lurked in the dark outside the tent, listening to the two little girls talk, just waiting for them to finally fall asleep.
It is absolute psychological warfare.
Yeah.
But keeping him on the line for an hour is what finally cracks the case. Because that massive hour-long call generated a very specific anomaly on a local Montana phone bill.
Yes, this is the turning point.
A rancher gets his bill and disputes a massive long-distance charge made at 3:25 in the morning to Michigan. The phone company realizes the number called was the Yeager residence. Now, the rancher's house was locked tight that night. Everyone was asleep.
Right.
But he had a secondary phone line running out to an empty field right next to the abandoned ranch where Sandy Dykman's car was found.
And when investigators rush out to look at that remote phone pole, they find fresh tire tracks in the mud. Tracks from a specific set of Goodyear tires.
Let me guess.
Yep. The exact same tires mounted on David Meyerhofer's truck.
Armed with this physical link, they finally move in. And David agrees to a second polygraph test. But this time, they administer it while he is under the influence of sodium pentothal truth serum.
Yeah, they tried everything.
And he passes it again.
Yeah.
How is that even biologically possible if his brain is chemically compromised?
Well, it comes down to what sodium pentothal actually does. It's a barbiturate, right? It depresses the central nervous system and lowers your cortical brain function, meaning you lose the cognitive ability to actively construct a complex lie. You default to your baseline reality.
Okay, so he couldn't think up a lie on the spot.
Exactly. The problem is David's baseline reality was completely detached from normal human empathy. He didn't have to construct a lie to hide his guilt because he fundamentally felt no guilt to hide. He believed his own version of reality.
But his physical reality is messy.
Yeah.
They finally search his house, and the evidence is terrifying. They find sheets stained with blood. They find 2 unused tickets to Disneyland, one of which is a child's ticket. They find a tube of lipstick, a little girl's blouse, and, maybe most chilling of all, they find stationery with the heading, Things to Do Today.
Oh, this part.
It's a literal to-do list of local Girl Scout camps, noting which ones are densely wooded and have good cover.
He is organizing his predatory behavior like he's running weekend errands. It's the banal documentation of pure evil.
But this is where the story makes you want to just scream at the archives. They find all this evidence, playlist, a newspaper clipping he cut out of a 5-year-old girl named Karen Smith.
Yeah.
The FBI takes it so seriously, they send an agent to be a 247 bodyguard for this little girl, literally sleeping on her family's couch with a shotgun. And yet they still don't arrest David.
I know.
He just calmly talks his way out of it, saying the bloody sheets were left by the previous owner.
Yeah.
How on earth was he allowed to stay on the street? It's just the arrogance of this guy.
It's infuriating. But it really speaks to the incredibly strict evidentiary standards of the time and a local justice system that simply could not comprehend that the polite, military veteran carpenter they all knew was a monster.
Yeah, the hometown boy.
Right. They didn't have a body, and they didn't have a confession. They needed one or the other to make a murder charge stick.
So the FBI decides to force a climax. They fly the Yeagers out to Montana for a face-to-face showdown. Imagine the tension in that room. Marietta Yeager, sitting across a table, staring directly into the eyes of the man she knows in her bones, stole her daughter.
Yeah.
David calmly looks her in the eye and denies everything.
And because they still lack the definitive legal hook, they have to let him walk out the door.
Unbelievable.
But the profilers at Quantico warned the agents on the ground. They said David will need to regain his sense of power. After being challenged like that by the mother, he will need to feel like he has the upper hand again.
Which leads to the final, sickening taunt. David manages to slip away from the FBI agents surveilling him. He drives out of state, finds a payphone at a motel in Salt Lake City, and calls Marietta one last time.
So cruel.
She picks up the phone, completely exhausted, and just says, "Hello, David." He tries to play dumb, but then he plays his trump card. He puts a little girl on the phone.
Yeah.
And the little girl says, "This guy, he's nice, and I'm sitting on his lap."
It's a move designed to completely break a parent's mind, to make her think he has Susie right there. But Marietta listens to the cadence, the pitch of the voice, and she knows instantly that is not Susie's voice.
The FBI swarms. The manhunt lasts 18 hours before they finally corner David back in Manhattan, Montana. And this time, they don't mess around. They tear his house apart in a deeper, much more aggressive search.
Finally.
And that is when they open his deep freezer.
This is the moment the facade completely shatters.
Picture this. You open the heavy lid of a chest freezer. It's packed with normal, mundane things. Frozen deer meat, elk, TV dinners. But nestled right in the middle is a small package wrapped tightly in thick butcher paper.
Yeah.
Written on the outside in marker are the letters SMDS, When investigators unwrap the icy paper, they find Sandy Dykman's severed fingers, her nail polish still perfectly intact.
He was keeping trophies. Just as the profilers predicted, souvenirs to extend his fantasy. And the sheer, undeniable horror of that physical evidence finally breaks his psychological armor. There's no talking his way out of that.
No. Faced with the contents of his own freezer, David Meyerhofer finally folds. In exchange for the state taking the death penalty off the table, he starts talking. He confesses to everything.
Yeah.
He admits to taking Susie to the abandoned ranch. He confesses that he strangled her when she tried to fight back against his assault. He burned her body, but casually mentions he tossed her severed head into an outhouse on the property, the one place they hadn't searched.
And he didn't stop there. He confessed to suffocating Sandy Dykman. But then the real shockwaves hit the interrogation room.
Yeah, he suddenly shifts the timeline way back. He calmly confesses that he was the one who crawled into the tent and stabbed 12-year-old Boy Scout Michael Rainey in 1968.
Horrifying.
And even further back, he confesses to a 1967 unsolved case where a teenager named Bernie Pullman was shot on a local bridge, a death everyone had assumed was a stray hunting bullet. Yet, despite confessing to all of this, he vehemently denies having anything to do with Donna Lemon or the attempted abductions at the Girl Scout camps.
It's a selective confession. I mean, why admit to some brutal murders and deny others? Because it allows him to maintain a final sliver of control. By withholding certain truths, he ensures he is still the smartest guy in the room. He still holds secrets they want.
But the justice system never gets the chance to parse those lies or put him on trial. Because just hours after signing his confessions, David Meyerhofer uses a towel to end his own life in his jail cell.
It's an incredibly abrupt, infuriating end. He evades a trial, he evades facing the families in court, and he ensures that the full scope of his crimes dies with him.
The lingering ghosts of this case are just overwhelming. I mean, there were terrifying loose ends in these case files that will likely never be tied.
Right. Like, who was that little girl on the final phone call from Salt Lake City? Was it a recording he had made of another victim? Was there actually a child sitting on his lap in that motel?
Makes you sick to think about.
And what about the unclaimed souvenirs in his house? The little girl's blouse, the lipstick. The parents of Sandy and Susie confirmed those didn't belong to their daughters. David traveled extensively for his father's business across several states. How many other victims are buried out there? We will just never know.
It's a chilling thought. But I want to leave you with a final, profound reflection from the source materials we dug into today. In her memoir, Marietta Yeager wrote about preparing for that fateful camping trip. She spent months worrying about the wilderness. She feared bears. She feared rattlesnakes wandering into their campsite. She never, in her wildest nightmares, realized that the most dangerous, ruthless predator in those woods would be a human being.
It's the ultimate subversion of our natural instincts. You prepare for nature, but you can't prepare for that kind of evil.
But here's the part that truly stops you in your tracks, and it's what I want you to think about today. Despite the unimaginable psychological torture that David Meyerhofer put her through, Marietta Yeager ultimately chose not to let his darkness consume her.
Wow.
She chose to forgive him. She went on to become a fierce, vocal advocate for forgiveness, traveling the country, speaking out against the death penalty. David Meyerhofer's entire pathology was built on control-stealing agency from his victims and their families. But by choosing forgiveness, Marietta Yeager did the one thing a psychopath can't comprehend. She took the control back. She refused to let him dictate her emotional reality. It makes you wonder, is forgiveness just a moral high ground? Or is it actually the ultimate psychological defense against people who want to break you?
That is just a powerful reframing of what it means to truly survive.
Exactly. Well, until next time, keep digging and keep asking the hard questions.